Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please make sure the volume of this podcast is set perfectly to your listening enjoyment. Please take your seat, whether that's on the treadmill, car, sofa, or bed, and buckle in for the last trip. My name is Jamie Beebe, and I'll be your tour guide, recreating someone's last days in paradise. On behalf of myself and everyone behind the scenes, please enjoy the Last Trip podcast. And because nobody likes a long flight to get to where they want to be, let's prepare for takeoff. When we pack our bags and check into a hostel, we're chasing adventure. A new city, a bunk bed, the promise of strangers who might become friends, or at least someone to split a cab with. And honestly, I love staying in hostels. I've stayed in them all over, tiny ones in coastal towns to big ones in the heart of cities. They're chaotic, friendly, weird, and wonderful. And for the most part, they feel safe. But behind the cheerful welcome signs and communal kitchens, something darker can hide. A stolen passport, a missing girl, a body in a room. From Australia to France to India, some travelers checked in, but never checked out. Today, I'm taking you around the world, one hostel at a time, to revisit the chilling true stories of backpackers who vanished, were attacked, or lost their lives in places meant to be safe havens for the wandering soul.
Hi there, we're Lauren
and Kenzie,
the co-hosts of A Scary State podcast.
Each week we cover a different state in the U.S. and we cover anything from murder mysteries,
Strange disappearances,
paranormal activity,
cryptids,
or urban legends.
So if you're interested in learning about the spooky things in your state, give us a listen.
New episodes come out every Wednesday and you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts.
Stay scary.
Stay safe.
We'll begin in the humid hills of Queensland, where a knife, a Bible, and a hostel dorm turned deadly. The Home Hill stabbings. Home Hill isn't the kind of place you'd expect to make international headlines. It's a rural farming town in Queensland, Australia, sugarcane country. Quiet, flat, humid, just over an hour south of Townsville. It has a single main street lined with pubs, takeaway joints, and a train station. The air smells like molasses when the mill is working. It's the kind of place where the days move slowly, and you're more likely to hear the wind in the cane fields than the sound of sirens. Home Hill is part of the Burdekin Shire, an agricultural powerhouse. It's where young travelers from Europe, Asia, and the Americas come to get their hands dirty. Literally. Under Australia's working holiday visa, if you spend a few months working in regional areas like this, you can earn the right to extend your stay. It's a great deal, but the work is grueling. Long days, harsh sun, poor pay, and the accommodations are often basic. But there's a charm to hostel life in these towns. There's a camaraderie that builds when everyone is tired, sunburned, and slightly broke. You eat together, you laugh together, you share Spotify playlists and secondhand paperbacks. It can be beautiful. The hostel was called Shelley's Backpackers, a modest, no-frills spot on 10th Avenue. A white-painted building with thin walls, dorm rooms, a communal kitchen, and the occasional barbecue night. It could sleep around 20 to 30 people, with guests rotating through depending on harvest schedules. At Shelley's, everyone was there for the same reason: visa days and money. You worked in the field during the day, came back sweaty and sore, ate pasta, watched Netflix on someone's laptop, and fell asleep to the buzz of fans and distant cane trains. Among the guests in 2016 were 3 people whose lives would become forever intertwined: Mia Ailif Chung, Tom Jackson, and Smail Ayad. Mia was from Wirksworth in Derbyshire, a town in the English countryside. Just 21 years old, she had a huge smile and an energy that radiated even in photographs. She'd studied psychology and media, worked as a waitress and model, and loved to write. In one blog post, she wrote about the joy of travel, about embracing adventure. She was in Australia on a working holiday, earning money so she could travel to the Gold Coast and beyond. Her plan was to eventually move to Bali to study yoga. Mia was fearless, funny, and completely herself. She had just started working on a local farm, picking zucchinis. Tom was older, 30 years old, from Congleton in Cheshire. He was taking time off after finishing a degree in international development. He was thoughtful, kind, and extremely selfless. He often helped younger backpackers settle in, gave them advice, and helped them understand the visa process. Tom and Mia weren't close friends, but they got along well. They had an instant camaraderie that often forms in hostel life. He'd only been at Shelley's a short while, but had already made a strong impression on the others. Then there was Smail Ayad, a 29-year-old French national who had arrived at Shelley's just days earlier. His background was murky. He claimed to be a professional kickboxer and musician. Some backpackers described him as charming at first. But soon, things shifted. Witnesses said Smail started acting erratically, talking to himself, making strange religious comments, and claiming he was a god. He carried a Bible and paced the halls at night. Some backpackers were unsettled, but weren't sure what to do. These kinds of hostels aren't known for robust management structures. Many times you're on your own. The day of the attack, August 23, 2016, started like any other. The guests at Shelley's cooked breakfast, made phone calls home, and walked into town. Mia posted cheerful updates to social media just days earlier. Tom spent the day hanging out with other backpackers, chatting in the common room. But around 11 p.m., the stillness of Home Hill was shattered. Smail entered Mia's room as she lay in her bunk bed. He was armed with a large knife. He forced her from her bed and onto a balcony, holding the blade to her throat. As other hostel guests gathered in confusion and fear, he warned them to back away. The atmosphere turned from eerie to frantic. Panic swept through the hostel. Some guests ran for help, others barricaded themselves in rooms. A few tried to intervene. Chaos took over. The hostel manager, Grant Scholes, heard the commotion and ran to the balcony. He confronted Smail, approaching cautiously. Another guest joined in, pleading with him to let Mia go, but the situation only escalated. Smail slashed Mia, and when she fell to the ground, he continued to stab her. Grant rushed forward to help, and Smail stabbed him in the leg. Bloodied but determined, Mia got to her feet and ran down the hallway toward the bathroom toward a sliver of hope. Another guest followed her, already on the phone with emergency services. This is when Tom heard the shouting, and without hesitation, without thought for his own safety, he sprinted upstairs to the bathroom. He found Mia bleeding heavily, crouched on the cold tile. He knelt beside her, applying pressure to her wounds, trying desperately to keep her alive. Together with the other guest, they began to move Mia from the cubicle, hoping to get her out. But as they opened the door, Smail was waiting. Tom tried to shut it, but Smail kicked it open. The knife came down again and again. Tom was stabbed repeatedly, suffering devastating wounds, including to his eye and brain. The second guest ran for help, screaming for someone, anyone. That's when Smail left the bathroom. And then, in a moment that stunned even seasoned police, he turned on the hostel's 10-year-old German Shepherd, Atari. He chased the dog around the yard and stabbed it to death. When officers arrived, Smail was still shouting Allah Akbar. They tried to subdue him. He fought violently, injuring several officers. Eventually, he was restrained. Atari and Mia died at the scene. Tom, critically injured, was rushed to the hospital. He spent 5 days in intensive care. His father flew in from the UK and stayed by his side, praying, hoping. But on August 28th, Tom Jackson also died. He sacrificed himself to save someone he barely knew. Tom, along with another guest, Daniel Richards, was later awarded the Queen's Gallantry Medal. And in 2021, Tom was posthumously awarded the Star of Courage, one of Australia's highest honors for bravery. The aftermath of the Home Hill stabbings unfolded in a cloud of media frenzy. In the first chaotic hours, headlines around the world screamed of terrorism. His cries of Allah Akbar echoed in the reports, and for a brief, chilling moment, it seemed like the worst-case scenario. But investigators quickly ruled out any ties to terrorism. Smale had no connections to extremist groups, no history of radicalization, no manifesto or agenda. This wasn't an act of ideological violence. It was something far more complex, and in some ways, more tragic. Smale was severely mentally ill. Over the months that followed, he underwent extensive psychiatric evaluations and was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. According to multiple forensic psychiatrists, at the time of the attacks, he believed he was the target of a vast international conspiracy. In his delusional state, he saw threats where there were none, and his psychosis turned deadly. Initially, Smale faced a string of serious charges: the murder of Mia, the attempted murders of Tom and Grant, and animal cruelty for killing the hostel's dog, Atari. Just days later, as the extent of the incident became clearer, he was charged with 12 additional counts of assaulting police officers during his violent resistance to arrest. When Tom died from his injuries, the attempted murder charge was upgraded to a second murder charge. On April 5, 2018, the Queensland Mental Health Court handed down its determination. Smail Ayad was of unsound mind at the time of the attacks. 4 independent psychiatrists testified that he was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, and his delusions were so extreme that he could not distinguish reality from fantasy. Because of this, the court ruled that Smail could not be held criminally responsible. His intent, a crucial element of any murder charge, could not be proven. So the charges were formally dropped, and instead, Smail was ordered to be detained at the Park Centre for Mental Health, a secure psychiatric facility in Brisbane. In July 2020, the coroner, Nerita Wilson, confirmed the findings in a report that echoed the same conclusion. This was not a case for inquest. It would change nothing, uncover nothing new. The truth had already been revealed: painful, complicated, and unalterable. In early 2021, Smail was deported to France. There, he was placed indefinitely into a psychiatric health facility, where he remains under care and supervision. Some criticized the outcome. Others understood. Mental illness had claimed 4 lives that night: Mia's, Tom's, Atari, and in some way, Smail's too. The families of Mia and Tom were left with the weight of a loss that couldn't be answered with justice in the traditional sense. There was no trial, no sentence, just a deep and tragic truth about the dangers of untreated mental illness and the thin line between safety and catastrophe in places meant to feel like home. Mia's mother, Rosie Iliff, became an outspoken advocate for backpacker safety and mental health reform. She traveled back to Australia, retraced her daughter's final days, and spoke with other travelers to better understand what had happened. Tom's father, Les, released a moving statement, saying his son's actions were those of a true hero. Hostels are supposed to be about connection, about finding your people, even just for a night. But when the thin thread of trust is broken, the impact ripples out forever. Mia and Tom were dreamers, travelers, people who chose to see the world, to be open to others. Their stories never should have ended this way. And yet, in Tom's final act, there was a kind of hope that even in the darkest moment, compassion still lived. That even among strangers, someone will try to help. Sophie Columbet loved to explore. She was smart, ambitious, and kind. The kind of traveler who walked with a purpose and carried herself with quiet confidence. She came to Brisbane, Australia in 2013, not just for adventure, but for education. She was pursuing a master's degree in international business at Griffith University. But on March 27th, 2014, her journey ended in the most brutal way. Her body was found just a few blocks from her hostel, in a rotunda at Kurilpa Point Park in South Brisbane, beaten, raped, and left to die in the open. This is her story. South Brisbane sits just across the river from Brisbane's Central Business District. It's vibrant, youthful, and always humming with energy. It's where the city's cultural heart beats the loudest. You'll find the Queensland Art Gallery here, the Gallery of Modern Art, the Performing Arts Center, and open-air markets that spill onto the footpaths with food from every corner of the world. It's a neighborhood where students, tourists, and locals brush shoulders on their way to grab coffee or lie in the sun by the river. Ferris wheels turn slowly overhead. Ferries slide past modern skyscrapers and colonial-style pubs. There's a sense of safety, a sense of community. It's not a place where you expect horror to unfold. Griffith University has a strong presence in South Brisbane. It's one of Australia's more progressive institutions, known for its arts, music, and social sciences programs. The student population is diverse, international and local, and the vibe is reactive, forward-thinking. People walk to class with portfolios and keyboards slung over their shoulders. For international students especially, Griffith offers a home away from home, and that was true for Sophie Collenbit. Kurilpa Point Park sits right behind the cultural precinct, a small green space by the river. It's peaceful, lined with palm trees, and overlooking the water. Families picnic here, joggers cut through at dusk. The Kurilpa Bridge, a twisting structure of white steel and cable, hovers just above it, lit up at night like a constellation frozen in time. It's a public space, open and accessible, surrounded by bright lights and city life. But that night, the park became something else entirely. It became a crime scene. Sophie was 21 years old, from Saint-Julien-en-Geneviève, a small French town near the border with Switzerland. Friends and family described her as warm, intelligent, and driven. She had dreams of working for a major international firm and using her language skills. She spoke English fluently and was learning Mandarin to make a mark in the world. She was staying at Brisbane City Backpackers, a large hostel perched on Upper Roma Street, just a 10-minute walk from the river and directly opposite the Roma Street train and bus station. The hostel was a hub for travelers coming in and out of the city, whether they were there for a weekend, a working holiday, or something in between. The building itself was big and bright with bold signage and multi-level dorms that could hold well over 100 people at a time. There was a rooftop terrace with plastic chairs and patchy Wi-Fi, a communal kitchen that always smelled faintly of noodles and burnt toast, and common areas full of beanbags and barefoot backpackers. The hostel even had its own bar and movie room. At night, music drifted out over the terrace, mingling with the sound of buses pulling in and out of the terminal below. It wasn't glamorous, but it had what most backpackers needed: a bed, a lockbox, and people to talk to. There was a rhythm to life at Brisbane City Backpackers. Morning checkouts, shared cereal, travel plans made over instant coffee. Guests scribbled job leads on the notice board, swapped hostel horror stories, and disappeared for days on trips up the coast or into the outback. And Sophie wasn't a backpacker in the traditional sense. She wasn't traveling for leisure. She was a master's student at Griffith University. But the hostel was affordable and close to everything. It offered safety in numbers. Even if you didn't know the names of the people in the bunk next to you, there was comfort in shared walls and murmured conversations after lights out. The people who stayed there came from everywhere: Germany, Brazil, South Korea, Canada. Some were fresh right out of high school. Others had quit their jobs to chase the sun. And then there were people like Sophie, quiet, focused, independent. She had plans, a degree to earn, a future to build. And she wasn't out drinking every night. She wasn't reckless. She was smart and careful. And like so many students living far from home, she trusted that the city she had come to study in would take care of her. But Brisbane failed her. On the night of her death, Sophie was on her way home from a university lecture. She stuck to well-lit streets and public areas. It was a Thursday evening. Sophie had attended class and was last seen by a fellow student just after 8 p.m., walking through South Brisbane. The area around Kurilpa Point Park is scenic, overlooking the Brisbane River and the city skyline. It's a popular spot for joggers and couples on evening strolls. What Sophie didn't know was that someone else was there too. Benjamin James Millward, 25 years old and spiraling in a haze of drugs, was also wandering through the park. He was born in Ipswich, Queensland, Australia, and details about his early life and upbringing are limited in public records. However, it's known that he had a history of criminal offenses, including violence and burglary. By 2014, Benjamin was grappling with substance abuse, particularly the use of methamphetamines, commonly known as ice. He was homeless and residing at the Oz Care Hostel, a facility for homeless men and those recently paroled from prison, located near Brisbane's Cultural Precinct. On the day of the murder, Benjamin consumed a combination of ice and alcohol, which he later said contributed to his impaired judgment. Shortly after 9 p.m., Benjamin attacked Sophie. In a violent and unprovoked assault, he beat her with a blunt object, raped her, and left her badly injured in the rotunda. She was either already dead or dying when he removed some of her clothing and positioned her body to look as though she were sleeping. Sophie lay there overnight. Dozens of people passed by the rotunda throughout the night and the following morning, some even sitting near her body. But no one realized she was dead. It wasn't until nearly 11 a.m. the next day that a homeless person realized something was wrong and called the police. The case shocked Brisbane. A young woman murdered in a public park in the heart of the city, left in plain sight for hours. Police quickly gathered CCTV footage and witness statements. Sophie's hostel confirmed she hadn't returned that night. Surveillance video showed her walking toward the park alone. Benjamin fled Brisbane and was arrested about 10 days later in Coffs Harbour, New South Wales. He was extradited to Queensland and charged with murder, rape, deprivation of liberty, and robbery. In 2017, he pled guilty to rape and murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 20 years. During his sentencing, Benjamin expressed remorse for his actions. His mother, Diane Millward, stated that her son was very sorry and was ready to accept the consequences of his actions. She also highlighted the detrimental impact of ice addiction, noting that it got the better of him. Sophie's parents were too distraught to travel to Australia. Her death prompted renewed calls for better lighting and security in public parks, and for stronger support for the homeless population. Hostels are meant to be a kind of sanctuary for travelers, a place where strangers become friends, where homesick students and sunburned backpackers gather around shared meals and worn couches, where people from different countries learn to say good morning in each other's languages. But hostels are also places of transience, of anonymity. You might sleep just a few feet from someone and never know their name. The doors don't always lock. The staff aren't always trained to notice when someone's scared. And in a place where everyone's coming and going, it's easy, too easy, for someone dangerous to slip through. Sophie Columbet was doing everything right. She wasn't out partying. She wasn't walking into danger. She was on her way home, on a well-lit path, just minutes from a hostel full of people. She had chosen Brisbane as a place to study, to grow, to build something for herself. And in the shadow of one of the city's most modern bridges, she was brutally attacked and left alone to die. And the worst part? No one noticed. In a city park full of joggers and commuters, her body sat on a bench for hours, covered only by her coat. People walked past her again and again, assuming she was asleep or drunk or just someone else's problem. And Sophie's story reminds us how easily we normalize the sight of a vulnerable woman alone, how quickly we look away, and how even in places filled with people, in hostels and parks and trains, danger can slip in unnoticed. Traveling alone doesn't mean someone is careless. It doesn't mean they were taking a risk. Sophie was just trying to get home, a hostel bunk, a night of sleep, and the next class waiting in the morning. But she never made it. And in that heartbreak, there's a call for something better, for more watchful eyes, for safer spaces, for a world that protects the people who dare to explore it. Hostels are often seen as gateways to adventure, a place where young travelers forge friendships, share stories, and rest after days filled with exploration. For many, they symbolize freedom and the joy of discovery. But sometimes, these sanctuaries become the backdrop for unimaginable tragedies. Next, we'll journey to Brittany, France, to recount the harrowing story of Caroline Dickinson. Plain-Fougère is the kind of town you might miss if you blink while driving through it. Tucked into the rolling green of northwestern France, this little village in Brittany is surrounded by farmland, hedgerows, and winding country roads. It's quiet, unassuming. The kind of place where the loudest sound might be church bells ringing on the hour, or the rustle of wind through the ferns. The name itself, Plain-Fougères, means plain of ferns, a nod to the area's ancient forested past. It's the kind of place you visit not for attractions, but for stillness, for proximity to something larger. Because just 20 minutes away is Mont Saint-Michel, the fairy tale island crowned by a medieval abbey, one of France's most visited landmarks. Pilgrims, school groups, and budget-conscious travelers often choose to stay nearby in quieter, more affordable villages. And Plain-Fougères, with its humble hostels and country charm, fits the bill. In the summer of 1996, one of those groups came from Launceston Community College, a secondary school in Cornwall, England. It was a typical school trip, a chance for teenagers to practice their French, explore local culture, and experience life in a different corner of the world. Caroline Dickinson was one of those students. She was 13 years old, bright, soft-spoken, a little shy, but known for her kindness. She had long hair, a quiet smile, and dreams that extended far beyond the classroom. This trip was a big deal. Her first time away from home without her family, her chance to see the world on her own terms. Caroline and her classmates were booked to stay at a typical youth hostel, the Auberge de Jeunesse, offering affordable accommodations to travelers and student groups. It was basic, but safe, the kind of place designed for groups like hers, the kind of place where nothing bad should ever happen. But that summer, the unthinkable happened. And in a town where the biggest local headline might be about a farmer's market, Caroline's murder sent shockwaves, not just through the UK, but around the world. It was a crime that changed the way people thought about hostels, about safety, and about how far danger is really willing to travel. Caroline Ann Dickinson was a bright, kind-hearted teenager born in 1982 in Plymouth, England. She lived with her mother, Susan Dickinson, a nurse, and her younger sister, Jenny. Her parents were divorced, and her father, John Dickinson, worked in environmental health and resided in nearby Bodmin. Caroline was a dedicated student, known for her diligence and gentle nature. She had a passion for music, playing the clarinet and piano in the school orchestra. Her interest extended to ballet, which she pursued until the age of 11, and she was also a member of the Brownies, reflecting her active involvement in community activities. Her enthusiasm for learning was evident in her dedication to studying French. Eager to immerse herself in the language and culture, she saved €90 from her pocket money to contribute to a school trip to France, with her father covering the remaining €145. The journey marked her first time traveling abroad without her family, a milestone she approached with both excitement and a touch of nervousness. Caroline's mother, aware of her daughter's shy disposition and the fact that she didn't have any close friends among the traveling group, requested that the accompanying teachers keep a watchful eye on her. Caroline's closest companion was her sister Jenny, because strong family bonds defined her young life. But Caroline never got the chance to grow into the woman she was becoming. She was taken just as her world was starting to expand by a man she didn't know. A stranger who had no connection to her school, her town, or her life. A man that did not belong in that youth hostel. And yet, that night in July, he found his way in. That man's name was Francisco Arce Montes. And the story of who he was and how he came to cross paths with Caroline is disturbing, global, and tragically familiar. Francisco was born in March 1950 in northern Spain. He was raised in a stable, middle-class home, an only child of grocers. But despite a seemingly normal upbringing, something was wrong. Even as a young man, he exhibited troubling behaviors, social isolation, compulsive habits, and disturbing fixations. At the age of 20, he was diagnosed with what was then called progressive schizophrenia, following an incident where he exposed himself to a neighbor. The offense was a warning sign, but it didn't lead to meaningful intervention. Instead, Francisco began a lifelong pattern of moving across borders, avoiding scrutiny, and leaving behind a trail of escalating crimes. By the 1980s, Francisco had developed a sinister routine. He targeted hostels, particularly those that housed young girls. He exploited the open, communal nature of these places meant to foster friendship and safety, for his own predatory purposes. He assaulted a young girl in a Dutch hostel in 1981. He was jailed for rape in Germany sometime later. In Spain, he was arrested for molesting children. He drifted from country to country, Germany, the Netherlands, Italy, the US, France, slipping through bureaucratic cracks and never staying long in one place. Each time, he reinvented himself just enough to disappear again, and he kept returning to hostels. He once told police he was addicted to being around young girls, that when he couldn't have what he wanted, rage would take over. In July 1996, Francisco arrived in Brittany, France. He'd been traveling through the region, sleeping rough, staying in cheap hostels, sometimes posing as a tourist. In the days leading up to Caroline's murder, he was spotted at several youth hostels in the area. In one, he was reported for loitering in the girls' dormitories, but again, he left before police could intervene. In Saint Lunaire, he reportedly tried to break into a girl's room, but was chased away. On July 17, 1996, Francisco made his way to the youth hostel where Caroline's school group was staying. The building was simple, basic dormitories, communal bathrooms, shared rooms. The atmosphere was relaxed. Doors were often left unlocked. That night, there was no receptionist on duty. Now, Francisco didn't know Caroline. He didn't know any of the students, but that didn't matter. He watched from outside, waited until the building was quiet, then slipped inside under the cover of darkness. Caroline and her friends were sharing a room with 4 bunk beds. It was hot that night. The windows were open. They'd spent the day visiting Mount St. Michael, had dinner, laughed, and written in their travel journals before going to sleep. In the early hours of July 18th, Francisco entered their room. He wore no shoes. He made no sound. The other girls didn't stir. And there, in the dark, he attacked Caroline as she slept. She was raped and suffocated, murdered silently just feet away from her friends, who would wake up hours later to discover her lifeless body in the bed next to them. Francisco walked out the same way he came in. No one saw him. No one knew who he was. He just disappeared into the morning. For 5 long years, Caroline's case remained unsolved. French police collected DNA from the crime scene but had no match. It wasn't until 2001 when Francisco was arrested for loitering in a Miami Beach hostel and attempting another assault that the pieces finally came together. His DNA matched the profile from the Plain-Furieuse crime scene. He was extradited to France, where he eventually confessed to the murder of Caroline Dickinson. He showed little remorse, claiming only that he had been in a rage. In 2004, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. His appeal in 2005 was rejected. Caroline Dickinson's murder didn't just break a family, it broke an illusion. That hostels, especially those full of students on school trips, were inherently safe. That if you followed the rules, stayed with your group, locked the door, were back before curfew, you were protected. Caroline did everything right. She went to sleep in a bunk bed, in a room full of her classmates, on a school-sanctioned trip, with trusted adults just down the hall. And still, she never woke up. Caroline's murder sparked an international firestorm. The French police were criticized for their slow and fumbled investigation. The crime scene had been contaminated. Interviews weren't properly recorded. Key witness accounts were missed or ignored. Her father, John Dickinson, was forced into a role that no parent should ever have to play: relentless advocate for justice. He campaigned tirelessly, meeting with police, pushing for forensic testing, and eventually working with British and American law enforcement to trace his daughter's killer. For 5 years, he lived in limbo, speaking Caroline's name to every journalist, officer, and politician who would listen. He refused to let her be forgotten. When Francisco was finally arrested in Florida, John flew there to watch the extradition process. When the trial began in France, he was there, front row. staring into the face of the man who had stolen his daughter. When the guilty verdict was handed down in 2004, John Dickinson said what millions were thinking. It doesn't bring her back, but it brings some peace. Carolyn's case was a turning point, especially for school trips and youth hostel safety protocols. In France, security regulations for hostels were re-examined. Doors that once stayed unlocked were now required to be secured at night. Group accommodations implemented new procedures. Staff must be on site 24 hours. Visitor logs became mandatory. Some hostels added surveillance systems and curfews. In the UK, schools reassessed their trip safety protocols. Teachers were trained in safeguarding with more urgency. Risk assessments became more thorough. But beyond logistics, the real reckoning was psychological. Parents became more fearful. Schools more cautious. Students more aware that even in groups, even in safe places, evil can slip in undetected. Because that's what Francisco Montes did. He didn't break down the door. He didn't use a weapon. He slipped into a space of trust, a space built for exploration and bonding. He invaded a room where teenagers should have felt the safest, among friends, asleep after a day of sightseeing. He turned a dream trip into a horror story. Hostels are built on openness, on shared kitchens, communal rooms, passing strangers becoming friends. They're not like hotels with lobby cameras and locked corridors. They're looser, freer. That's the magic and the risk. And most of the time, hostel travel is what it's supposed to be. Vibrant, cheap, connective. Stories like Caroline's remind us that when safety fails in a communal space, it doesn't just fail one person. It shatters a sense of collective trust. Caroline wasn't reckless. She wasn't alone. She wasn't in a dark alley. She was surrounded by people who loved her, teachers, friends. But she still died in the middle of the night in a room full of sleeping girls because one man exploited every gap in the system. It's easy to tell ourselves that these are rare, unthinkable tragedies, and in some ways they are. But Caroline's story asks us to confront a hard truth. That safety isn't always about street smart, self-defense, or choosing the right place to stay. Sometimes it's about blind spots and the very structures we trust the most. Caroline Dickinson was 13 years old. She loved dancing. She loved her family. She wanted to become a writer. Her trip to France should have been the beginning of a lifetime of stories. Instead, we're left telling hers again and again. So she's never just a victim, never just a headline. Because every case like this is a girl who deserved to come home. In the vibrant tapestry of Goa's coastal allure, where sun-kissed beaches meet the rhythmic cadence of waves, a shadow was cast in March 2017, a shadow that would linger for years. This is the story of Danielle McLaughlin, a spirited traveler whose journey ended tragically, and the subsequent pursuit of justice that spanned nearly a decade. To understand why 28-year-old backpacker Danielle McLaughlin was drawn to Canacona, you have to understand the kind of place it is. Canacona sits at the southern edge of Goa, India's smallest state, but one with an outsized reputation. Unlike North Goa's party-heavy clubs and packed beaches, the South offers something else entirely: quiet, nature, and a slower rhythm of life. Canacona is sometimes called the gateway to the real Goa, where travelers come not for the crowds, but for the calm. Once a Portuguese colony, Goa has long carried a unique cultural blend. Catholic churches next to Hindu temples, colonial mansions nestled amid palm groves. Canacona reflects that layered history. Originally a tribal region inhabited by the indigenous Kunbi people, evolved into a settlement influenced by trade, European colonization, and post-independence migration. Today, it's known for its dramatic landscapes, dense forests, rocky cliffs, and beaches that feel untouched by time. It's those beaches, especially Palolem, Agonda, and Kollam, that draw backpackers in. Palolem is the star, a crescent-shaped bay lined with colorful beach huts, yoga classes at sunrise, and cafes lit by fairy lights at night. There's no big hotel sprawl here, just huts made of bamboo and palm fronds, hammocks strung between coconut trees, and conversations that stretch long into the night. It's no surprise that Danielle was one of the thousands who made their way to Canacona each year. For someone like her, artistic, spiritual, adventurous, it was the perfect place to breathe, to write, to reflect. And she had been there before. She knew its rhythms. She trusted it. And she arrived on February 23rd, 2017 to celebrate Howley, the Festival of Colors, a joyful explosion of music, dancing, and paint-splattered revelry. She planned to visit friends, reconnect with the community she'd come to love, and practice yoga in one of the many open-air studios that lined the coast. She wasn't running away from anything. She was moving towards something: connection, growth, peace. But even in a place that feels like paradise, danger can hide in plain sight. Initially, Danielle was staying in the northern region of Goa, but seeking to partake in the Howley festivities, she traveled to Canacona. While there, Danielle was offered accommodation in a beach hut, a common lodging choice among backpackers in the area. These beach huts are typically modest structures, providing basic amenities and close proximity to the beach, offering travelers an immersive experience of coastal life. Danielle was not alone during her stay. She was accompanied by her Australian friend, and together they participated in the Howley celebrations in the nearby village. While these huts and hostels offer unique charm, their informal structure and minimal security can sometimes pose risks, especially for solo and female travelers. Danielle was 28 years old, from the quiet seaside town of Donegal, Ireland. She was the eldest of 6 sisters, a role she took seriously, but with warmth and laughter. To Danielle, family was everything. She lovingly called them her gears, a term that perfectly captured how much they all meant to her, each one vital, interconnected, part of the same whole. Danielle was curious about the world, not just the places on a map, but the people in it, the stories, the struggles, the beauty. That curiosity took her to Liverpool, John Moores University, where she studied social sciences. She wanted to understand people, how we connect, what drives us, how societies function. Her education wasn't just about books. It was about finding her place in a world she hoped to make better. But Danielle wasn't the type to stay still for long. She was a traveler, drawn to color and culture, always seeking moments of joy and understanding. Before her final trip to India, she had volunteered at an orphanage, spending her time not just helping, but truly listening. She had that rare ability to make others feel seen. She didn't just show up. She showed up with heart. Yoga became another extension of her journey. Danielle had plans to train as a yoga teacher. It made sense. It combined everything she loved: movement, mindfulness, inner peace, and connection. Her friends described her as grounded and free-spirited at the same time. She radiated kindness. She had a natural empathy that made people feel safe around her. When she traveled to India in early 2017, it wasn't her first visit. She knew the region. She loved its vibrant rhythms, its spiritual energy, its celebration of life. Danielle McLaughlin was not just another traveler. She was someone who brought light with her wherever she went. But someone in the shadows was about to dim that light. Vikat Bhagat was a 23-year-old resident of Goa at the time of the crime. He had a criminal history, with prior convictions for theft and house break-ins. Vikat was known to local authorities as a history sheeter, indicating a pattern of repeated offenses. The two had met and become friends when Danielle visited Goa in 2016. And according to Vikat, they were in a relationship since that time. However, Danielle referred to him as a brother, obviously suggesting a platonic connection. On March 13th, after traveling to Canacona to celebrate the Howley Festival, she left her Australian friend to meet acquaintances from her previous trip, including Vikat. But this meeting would end in the worst way imaginable. Let's walk through her final day. Around 11 a.m., she was seen joining celebrations at Green Park Resort, a venue just a few minutes from where she was staying. Howley in Goa is loud and joyful. Music blasting, people dancing in fields and along the beach, faces painted in streaks of neon. And Danielle joined in, dancing barefoot, letting herself get swept up in the moment. Around 7 p.m., Danielle was seen leaving Green Park Resort. CCTV footage captured her walking with Vikat, looking calm. By 9 p.m., the two were seen again, this time leaving a nearby beach shack. It would be the last confirmed sighting of Danielle alive. She was barefoot, smiling, a little sunburnt. She trusted him enough to walk with him into the night. But somewhere, in those late hours, something snapped. Vikat later admitted he had taken her on his scooter to a more remote area, an open field near Devba, away from the lights and the sea. He said they argued, that she refused his advances. And then, in an act of violence and rage, he attacked her. The autopsy would later show she was strangled and bludgeoned, suffering traumatic brain injuries. There were also signs of sexual assault. Vikat left her body in the field and returned home quietly. The next morning, around 7 a.m., a local farmer walking through the field saw something unusual. Bare feet in the grass. A woman lying on her back. Her face was bloodied. Her clothes were in disarray. Police arrived on the scene and immediately suspected foul play. This was not an overdose or beach accident. This was brutal, intentional. Now, Danielle had no ID on her. Her face was unrecognizable due to the extent of the injuries. But word spread quickly to the backpacker circles of Palolem and Aganda. By mid-morning, her identity was confirmed. Within hours, suspicion turned to Vikat. Police visited his home. His scooter was found with bloodstains, as were his clothes. He had scratch marks on his arms and face. He was arrested the next afternoon, confessing to the crime, charged with rape, murder, robbery, and destruction of evidence. The case garnered international attention, highlighting concerns about the safety of solo female travelers and the efficiency of India's legal system. Danielle's family, particularly her mother, Andrea, embarked on an arduous journey seeking justice. Over the course of 8 years, they faced numerous delays and over 250 court hearings. And despite these challenges, their unwavering determination culminated in verdict. On February 14th, 2025, the District and Sessions Court in Goa found Vikat guilty of Danielle's rape and murder. He was sentenced to rigorous life imprisonment, with additional penalties for the destruction of evidence. Danielle's tragic death serves as a poignant reminder of the vulnerabilities that travelers, especially women, may face. While the allure of exploration and cultural immersion is profound, it is imperative to remain vigilant and informed. Danielle's final 24 hours were filled with light, with movement, with music, until they weren't. Until the place she had come to for healing became the site of unimaginable violence. And for every traveler who hears this story, it's a reminder. Safety isn't always about where you are. It's about who you trust. I tell stories that sit at the intersection of wanderlust and warning. No, not to scare you, but to help you travel smarter. Because travel is sacred. It's where we learn who we are, where strangers become friends, where moments turn into memories. But like all the best things in life, it asks us to show up with open eyes, aware, informed, and prepared. So let's talk about safety. Not as a shadow over your adventures, but as a spotlight to illuminate the risks, the red flags, and the ways we can take care of ourselves and each other. Each of the stories you've just heard, Mia and Tom in Australia, Sophie in Brisbane, Caroline in France, Danielle in Goa, carry their own heartbreak. But they also carry lessons, not just in grief, but in grit. Now let's start with hostels. For so many travelers, especially solo ones, hostels are more than just a place to sleep. They're community hubs, full of new faces and late-night conversations over shared meals. They're affordable, social, and often unforgettable. But not all hostels are created equal, and depending on where you are, their oversight can vary widely. In rural Australia, Mia and Tom stayed at a working hostel, like thousands of other backpackers who trade labor for lodging. These hostels are vibrant, transient spaces, but they can also fall through the cracks of regulation. Staff may be limited. Guests change daily. Sometimes rules are more of a suggestion. If you or someone you love is staying in one, take a deeper look. Star ratings won't tell you what recent reviews will. Scan for mentions of safety, staff presence, locked doors, and how the hostels handle unruly behavior. And once you're there, observe. If someone is acting erratically, say something. Tell staff, a friend, the authorities. You do not need to wait for danger to feel real before you act. Tom Jackson was incredibly brave when he stepped in to help. But bravery doesn't always mean putting yourself at risk. Sometimes it means calling for help. Being cautious isn't cowardly, it's wise. In cities, the risks shift. Sophie Colombitt was doing everything right, walking through a well-lit park in central Brisbane, just minutes away from her hostel. That's exactly why her murder shook the nation, because it happened somewhere that felt safe. Now, urban spaces can create a false sense of security. We think it's lit, it's populated, it's close to home. But even in cities, even near universities or downtown areas, awareness is key. If you're walking alone at night, take the longer route that sticks to busy streets. Spend the few extra dollars on rideshare or bus. Keep your phone charged. Let someone know where you're going and when you plan to be back, even if it's just a message to your bunkmate or the front desk. And don't be afraid to check in on others too. Hostels are built on temporary connections, but those connections can save lives. Then there are the quieter places, the sleepy towns, the spots that feel immune to danger. And that's where 13-year-old Carolyn Dickinson was staying, a peaceful youth hostel in rural France, full of classmates and chaperones. It felt safe. But safety isn't just about location, it's about prevention. Back in 1996, hostel security looked very different. Today, many hostels have key cards, surveillance cameras, and round-the-clock staff. Choose places that take those measures seriously. Ask questions. Are dorm doors lockable? Are guests vetted? Are front doors monitored at night? And if you're traveling in a group, especially with younger travelers, create systems, emergency contacts, bed checks, shared alarms. Carolyn's killer entered unnoticed, but in the weeks before, he had been spotted lurking at other hostels, posing as a guest. Trust your gut and speak up. If someone seems out of place, let someone know. You're not being rude, you're being responsible. And then there's Danielle McLaughlin, a seasoned traveler, open-hearted, brave. She went back to Goa, a place that felt like home. She was relaxed, reconnecting, and she left with someone she knew, someone she danced with before on the beach. That's what makes her story so painful. He wasn't a stranger. When you're traveling, especially solo, past familiarity does not always mean present safety. Reunions can be beautiful, but they also deserve boundaries. If you're going somewhere with someone you've connected with, meet in public. Tell someone where you're going. Trust your instincts, even if it feels awkward. Especially in places like Goa, where hostels can be open air and trust-based. Prioritize the ones with gates, key cards, and staffed receptions. If locals are staying there too, make sure the rules are clear and enforced. Use tools like WhatsApp safety groups or share your live location when heading out. Set meetup points during festivals like Howley. Now these aren't buzzkills, they're anchors. So you can keep floating freely, but never alone. Sometimes danger wears a smile, comes in the form of an old friend, a fellow guest, a passing conversation. And that's why we talk about it. Not to dim the joy of travel, but to make space for it. Real joy, the kind that comes from feeling safe enough to fully exhale. We don't stop traveling because of tragedy. We learn, we adapt, we protect one another. The world is still out there, wild, wide, full of beauty and possibility. And hostels, they can be magical places, where stories are swapped over cheap wine, where strangers watch each other's backpacks, where laughter echoes through bunk beds. But magic and safety, they go hand in hand. Stay curious, stay open, but stay sharp. Not scared, just smarter. For Mia, for Tom, for Sophie, for Carolyn, for Danielle, and for the next traveler who, like them, dares to go see the world. I've talked about 4 very different cases. Mia and Tom, whose dreams of adventure ended in tragedy at a working hostel in Australia. Sophie, a student walking home through a city park in Brisbane. Caroline, whose school trip to France was shattered by a predator who slipped through the cracks. And Danielle, who returned to a place she loved, only to be betrayed by someone she thought she knew. These are devastating stories, and they're hard to hear. But they don't mean the world is too dangerous to explore. They don't mean we should stop staying in hostels, making new friends, or setting off into the unknown. They mean we travel with eyes open. We ask better questions. We trust our instincts. We check in with each other. And we remember that safety isn't the opposite of freedom. It's what lets freedom last. Because the truth is, hostels can still be magical. City parks can be peaceful. Solo travel can change your life. And most of the people you'll meet on the road, they'll be kind, generous, strangers who become friends, and memories you'll carry forever. So don't stop traveling. Just travel smarter, travel prepared. Travel like someone who knows how quickly life can change and chooses to keep going, chasing the next horizon, one safe step at a time. And finally, remember to leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars if you like the show, or hell, even if you don't. But either way, feel free to let me know what you think. Please follow The Last Trip on Instagram at The Last Trip Crime Pod, and subscribe on Patreon to support the show. You'll get extra research, videos, photos, and updates, and even learn more about my personal travels. That's patreon.com/thelasttrippodcast. I'm Jamie Beebe, bringing you your last trip and signing off until the next one. Thanks for listening.